Hey guys, this is Mitch with Fine Point CGI, and today we're going to talk about how to create a menu system using the new 3.5 tweening system. So we're going to go through the process of discussing how the new tweening system works a little bit. We're going to talk about how to handle creating transitions in a very flexible way. We are also going to talk about how to create a scalable UI system so you can go down to child objects and still have it recurse up and close the ones below it. And finally, we are going to talk a little bit about how the new tween system works with the set trans and things like that. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to make a menu controller because I do like my controllers. So we'll head over here, we'll right click on our control node, we will attach a script and we will call it menu controller. All right, now that we have that, let's hook up a couple of our buttons because we're going to need buttons to show and hide menu elements. So let's head over to our scene. Let's click on our options button right here. Let's click on node and click button down and attach it to our control node. And let's do the same thing with our player button. So we'll click both of those and connect them. And now that we have that, what we can do is we can basically say, hey, when this button is pressed, then go ahead and move our menus, right? But instead of just directly referencing our menus here, let's actually make a script specifically for our menus. So we're going to right click our option menu. We're going to attach a script and just call it a menu.gd. Now, the reason why we don't want to do it in our menu controller is because there are times where we might want to make specific changes to our menus, and it really makes our code a little bit more flexible. So what we need to do with our menu is we need to have the ability to open and close our menus, right? So what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll say func open menu, and then we'll go ahead and pass, and then we can say func close menu, and we'll go ahead and pass as well. So what we want to do when we open and close a menu is we want to be able to play some kind of animation, right? And we could use an animation player for that, but animation player is A, very specific to what you're trying to do, and B, it is way heavier than using a tween. So what we'll do is we'll use tween instead. And instead of using the Godot node tween, which if I right click and add a child node and I type in tween, instead of doing that and adding in a tween node, instead we're going to use Godot 3.5's new feature, which is called the tree-based tweening. Okay, and tree-based tweening allows us to tween a property using the tree node instead of using the tween node. And the reason why that's better is because it's more efficient and it's held in memory differently inside of Godot. It doesn't exist as an actual node, it just exists as a piece of code in space, if that makes sense. So first, we need to make it so it can tween and bring the object in, right? So in this case, for this specific options menu, I'm going to make it so that it will slide in, okay? So it kind of like expands, if that makes sense. So what we'll do is on open menu, we're going to make our object visible because we have to make sure that our menu is visible. So we'll say visible is equal to true. And then we need to create our tween. So we'll say var tween is equal to get tree dot create tween. Okay, and then we need to make it so that our tween is tweening a property. So we can say tween dot tween property, and we'll go ahead and pass it to ourself because we're going to tween ourself. And then we need to choose the property that we're going to tween. Now in my case, I'm going to tween rect underscore size, and I'm going to make it equal to a vector2, and that vector2 is going to be 323 comma 311, And we're going to tween it over a 0.1 of a second. So it's going to be 0.1 of a second. Now, I know the question you might be asking, how did I get rect size and how did I decide what my vector 2 was going to be? Well, that's pretty simple. If we click on our options menu and we come over to our inspector, you'll see our size is 325 and our size here is 267. So technically this should be 325, which was my fault. I thought it was 323, but that's okay. And how I got rect size was that this is under the rect parameter and it's the size parameter. So you can see if you hover over this, it'll say rect size. So if you wanted to move an object, instead you would just do rect position, right? Or if you wanted to maybe scale it, you could do rect underscore scale, and that also will work. So that's kind of how you can make this work, is that you could pass in whichever ones you're looking for, if that makes sense. So unlike previous iterations of Tween, we don't need to start Tween. It just automatically starts, which is really cool. So now we have our open menu code basically completed, and our close menu is basically the same code. We can just kind of copy this bit of code here, copy it, and paste it, set this to false, and then we can set this to 0, right? And that should basically handle it. Now, if we head over to our menu controller, and if we come down to our option button down and we go ahead and call that, so $ option menu dot open menu, and we hit Control S and we hit play and we click on it, you'll see that not much happens. And the reason why is because the menu's already at the proper scale. So if we close this and adjust our scale to this to something like 0, and then we hit play and play it, you'll see that it does actually work, right? But we need to make it so that we can open and close our menu on a click of that button, right? So what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll need to determine if it's open, right? So if we go into our script here and we come up here and we say var is open, we'll make that a type bool. That'll allow us to have some kind of variable to work with, right? And we'll need to set that variable. So we'll just come down here and set it. So we'll say is open is equal to true. And then same thing over here, except for is equal to false, right? And that should basically do it, right? And then we can just come in here to our menu controller and say if $ options menu dot is open, then we can close it, right? So we'll take $ options menu dot close menu, else we are going to go ahead and open our menu, right? So now if we hit play and we hit options menu, you'll see it crashes because it says non-existent function, and that's my fault. So it's a variable, not a function. And let's try that again. If we hit the button, you'll notice it opens. And then if we click close, you'll notice it disappears. Now, why is that? If we click, it opens properly. But if we click again, it closes and it gets destroyed, right? It goes away or it gets hidden, but it doesn't actually play the animation. So how can we solve that? Well, that's where signals come in with the new Tween node. We can come into our options menu and we can actually hook up a signal up here. We can hook up a signal called finished. So if I type tween dot connect, and you'll see we have a couple of options here. The first one is finished, and finished means when the tween is completed, it will fire this off. Loop finished means if the tween is looping, when that loop finishes, it will fire. Whereas with finished, it will only fire once the entire tween and all of its loops are finished. That's the big difference between the two. Script change only fires when the tween node's script has changed, and step finished fires when each step of the tween is finished. So for instance, if you were looking at a character or something like that, you might want to use step finished so that it maintains looking at the player every single step it moves, right? Whereas finished, when it's fully completed with its move, then it will look at the player. So that's the big difference between the two. So in our case, we're going to use finished. And we're going to connect that to ourself, and we're going to create a new function called on_onFinished. And then we'll come down here and we'll say func on_finished. And then we will go ahead and set our visible equal to false, and then get rid of it up here. And that should basically solve our problems. Now, if we hit play and we click on our options menu, you'll notice it opens, and then we click and it closes, and it finishes its animation like we expected. See that? So now that's cool. Let's hook up our other button, right? So we have another button called, if I remember correctly, it's called players right here. And that's going to open up this players menu right here, right? Now, in this case, we want our players menu to fade in and out, okay? But if we just right click and create a menu.gd for this, we're going to have a lot of duplicated code. You can see how this menu would basically be the exact same code between both of these guys. It would be just basically a difference in our rec size and our vector or whatever object we're putting in here, right? So instead, let's refactor our menu code to be a little bit more generic. So we'll come up here and we'll say, okay, let's pass in a value here. So we'll just say parameter, comma, value. And then we'll just change this from rect size to parameter, and then change this from vector2 to value. And I'm just going to cut this so that I have it. I'm going to copy it so that way I have it, so that way it doesn't go away. And then when I go over to my menu controller, when I call it here, I can pass in my rect underscore size, comma, my vector2. And then we could basically just do the exact same thing. Copy this, paste it in here, set this to 0, and then come over here, copy these two parameters right here, paste them like that, copy these two parameters, and paste them just like that. And then we should get the exact same result. So if we hit play, we can click on our options menu, which actually my players menu is open, so I'll close that. If we hit play and we click on our options menu, you'll see that it works. And we get the added flexibility that we can basically just take our menu script here, drag it onto our player menu, go over to our control node here, and just call it when that button is pressed. So if we go to our menu controller, inside of here, we can just basically copy this code structure and use it. So we can say if $player menu dot is open, right, then $player menu dot close menu. And instead of doing rect size, what we can give it is the modulate property. So we'll say modulate, modulate, and it takes in a color. So we'll say color. And in our case, since we're closing, we're going to want to make it disappear. So we'll hit 1, 1, 1, 0. And then we can do the same thing here. Else $player menu dot open menu, and we'll pass in the modulate color 1 as well, except for we'll set the color to 1. Now, if we save this and test it, you will see when we hit players here, you'll see that it fades in and it fades out like you'd expect. So if we close this, we click, you'll see it fades in and it fades out like you would expect. Awesome. So now the question is, how can we do this with submenus? Okay, so if we click on players, we do have a button here. What if we click this and we wanted another menu to spawn here? Well, that's pretty simple. All we really need to do is go to our fade menu, which in this case is fade menu 2. So I'll rename that to fade menu. That'll be a little easier. If we drag our menu up to fade menu, and then we hook our button for our player menu, which is, if I remember correctly, right here, this one specifically. If we hook that up by going to node and then button down, and then we click on our control node like this, we can basically just do the exact same thing we're doing here. So again, it's just this simple. You just say $ player menu dot is open, much like before. Then we can basically just do the same thing that we've been doing. So we'll just copy this, we'll paste it, we'll say dot close menu, and then we'll say else dot open menu. And that'll basically just do what we would expect. So now we can say, okay, we want it to fade, right? So we'll just grab our modulate right here. We'll paste that in. We'll paste that in. We'll set this to 1, and that should basically do it for us. Now, if we come up here and we test it real quick, so we hit play, you'll notice that when I hit players, it closes and opens like we would expect. We click on test, and it suddenly just closes our test, and it doesn't open up our other one, right? So why is it doing that? Well, if we close this and we take a look at our code, you'll see why. And it looks like actually we have a bug. I put player menu, not the fade menu that I would expect. So let's do fade menu instead. So we'll grab this, grab that, and that should handle that. So if we hit play, you'll see if we open and close players, that works. If we click test, that also works as expected. But here comes the weird part. If we click on players, our sub menu is still open. And that's a problem, right? Because we can't just have menus floating in space. So how can we solve this? Well, we're going to need to do a little bit of magic, right? So first, we need to keep track of what menus are open. So how can we do that? Well, we can make a list of menus and hold what menus are currently open. So if we come up to the top, we can create a variable here called menus. So we'll just say var menus is equal to an empty list or an empty array. And now we can come down here and we can check to see if anyone's open on our close, right? But we can't just say, okay, like we're going to check to see if anything's open and that's it, right? We need to do some additional logic to handle that. We don't want to duplicate our code. So you can see here we have lots of duplicated code, right? And we don't want to just duplicate our code either. So it's going to be best for us to create a function to kind of do all of this little bit of work here in some form of abstract way. So what we'll do is we'll come up here and we'll say func toggle panel, and we'll pass in a menu item. We will pass in a parameter. We'll pass in a value open, and we'll pass in a value closed. And then we can basically just take this bit of code here, we can paste it in right here, and then we can basically just take this, change it to menu, and then do the same thing down here. So we'll just kind of grab this little bit here like that. And then we can pass in our parameters right here. And then we can pass in our value open and our value closed. And now all of these guys can be simplified quite a lot, actually. What we can do is we can say toggle panel and pass in our menu item here. And then we can pass in our parameter, which in this case is rect size, and our value open, right? So copy this, paste it, copy our open value, paste it, and then copy our closed value right here and paste that. And that basically achieves the same thing, but we're going to have less code. So now we can do the same thing down here. So we can just hit enter, toggle panel, paste that in, pass in our menu just like this, comma, pass in our parameter just like this, and then pass in our color parameter right here as well. And I know I'm kind of doing it out of order here, but that's just because it's a little bit easier with the copying and pasting. But I can just pass that in, and that's all I need to do. And since the other one's basically the same, this one down here is the same, we'll just paste it in like that. And we'll just pass in our fade menu as well. So we'll just paste that in, comma, and then get rid of that. And there we go. That makes this a lot simpler, and it gives us the flexibility of being able to put one processing logic in one area, if that makes sense. So now what we'll do is we're going to first, and since we have a list, we need to kind of keep track of our index, if that makes sense. So first we'll say var index is equal to 0, okay? And then we need to find where our menu item is in our array, okay? So we'll say if menus dot find menu equal 0, then we can just set our index equal to our menus dot size. Now, this is useful because we're basically saying if you choose the bottom of the call stack, so if you chose something like the options menu, right, and you wanted to close that, then it's going to close everything below it, right? Else, we need to set our index equal to our menus dot size minus our menus dot find our menu. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to take our menu size. So let's say we have 5 drop down menus, right? 5 menus in a stack, right? So you come in and you go, okay, file, person, edit person, change person's name, right? And you want to close the person side of it, right? That would require you to come down 2 call stacks, right? Because you have 1, 2, what it would be 1 through 5. So let's say you want to close number 3. Well, you have to close 4 and 5 as well. So what we're doing is we're getting the index offset of that object's location and how many is above it, if that makes sense. Now we can set our current menu object to our menus. And the reason why I'm doing this, so we'll say var current menu is equal to menus. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want to modify my array while I'm iterating through it. I don't know if it would really cause a problem with Godot, but in a lot of game engines it does. So I just want to make sure that it's safe. Then from there, we can loop through our index, but we have to do it backwards. And that's where things get kind of weird. So we'll say for I in range index -1, comma, -1, comma, -1. And that will reverse our entire array. So that way we can just iterate through it backwards. And now we can just say current menu, and we'll need to do some funky math here. So we're going to say menus dot size -I -1 dot close menu. And then we need to pass in our closed menu parameters. So in our case, and actually it looks like we have the wrong parameters for our closed menu because we have value open and value closed. So let's quickly switch that. This should be value closed. And we'll just grab this parameter set, drop it into here, get rid of this because we don't need it anymore. And we need to remove our menu from our actual array. So we'll say current menus dot remove, And then we'll basically just grab this bit of code here so it maintains consistency right there. And then once we're done with our entire closing, we need to set our menus equal to our current menu. So we'll say menus equal to current menus. Now, I know that this was a lot, so we'll walk through this and kind of explain it in a more detailed way. So first, we have our index. And the reason why we do this is because we need to set it based off of what we are selecting from our array. So in our case, if we're selecting our base object of our array, we need to say, hey, we have to iterate through everything. If not, then we have to find the offset between where this object is at the end of our stack. So for instance, if we have, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we say that we want to select this one, or actually it'll be easier if we say this one or this one, right? We need to say, okay, we have 6 items in our array minus the 3 that we have. That means that we're starting from here and we're iterating backwards. So we're starting from here and we're going back 3. So we're saying 1, 2, 3, and then we are closing everything there, if that makes sense. And that's basically what we're doing here is we're just iterating backwards. We're actually taking our for I in range and we're literally flipping it and going backwards. So then from there, we're literally just taking our size, we're minusing our I, so we can start at, let's say, if we have 6 items in the array and our index is 3, then what we're doing is we're saying, okay, let's flip it and then minus it out so that way it matches. So it actually would be 5, 4, and 3, if that makes sense. And then we are closing those guys and then we're removing them from our stack. And I'm probably not explaining it very well, but that's basically what we're doing. Now, if this has been done properly, then we should be good to go to actually test this. So we'll hit play. We'll click on players. We'll close players. You'll see that that works. If we click on test, we can close test, and that works. And if we close our players, then it closes it just as if we would expect it. Awesome. I think that will work. So let's do a quick test to see if this works for longer call stacks. Because one of the things that we have to make sure that we keep track of is how would we handle a longer stack of items, right? And let's see if our system can handle it. So I'll come into our 2D scene. I'm going to make our fade object visible, and I'm going to control duplicate it. I'll drag this guy over here just like this, and I'm going to connect our fade button. We'll just connect that to our control node. And I'm just going to say on button 2 button down, and we will just say $ toggle panel $ fade menu 2, comma, and then we'll basically just grab this bit of code here. We might as well just reuse it just like that. And now if we hit play, well, I have them showing, so hold on one moment. We'll disable them from showing, hit play, and then we will go and click players, test, test, and you'll see that we can properly close this guy. If we close these guys, it properly closes that guy. Awesome. And if we close this guy, it properly closes everything all the way down the stack. Awesome. So that's basically how you create a basic interface management system using the new Tween system inside of Godot. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the Tween system that we didn't talk about, like how you can chain your tweens or how you can do stuff like, different tween styles, which, by the way, if you want to do that, it's actually pretty simple. You just come in here and you just hit .set trans, and that will allow you to set the tween trans, right? So if you want it to be a bounce or a circ or a cubic or elastic or expo, something like that. So that is something that I'm not really covering. Or .set ease, which allows you to set the ease so you can actually ease it in or ease it out. So you could actually just ease it in. Things like that, stuff like that we didn't really cover. You can see here how it kind of changed how it works, and that's fine. But that is how you create a menu system using the new Tween system inside of Godot. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. This video, as with all of my videos, was a viewer suggested video. So I take your suggestions very seriously. And if you guys have any suggestions, throw them in the comments below because I am here to make content for you guys and I always take your suggestions. And I'll throw it on my Trello board, which I have a link to in the description below. And that can kind of give you an idea of some of the things that I've been investigating or looking at, though I haven't really kept it up to date as much as I would like. And hey, if you guys have any questions about this or any comments, throw them in the comments below or jump on my Discord. Link is in the description, and any of the people there would be more than happy to help you out with any issues you might have. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks.